No. This publication, Padatik publication.
She hardly needs an introduction. But she has been a source of inspiration to youths as well as elders for her courage, her candor, and the spirit with which she has spoken about the need to break the form in which our society finds itself at present. And this form itself has become a kind of prison. And people are absolutely dissatisfied with it. But they are quite at sea, should I say, to find a way out of it, or a means of breaking it. And that's why I think she's a kindred spirit. The last 20 years or so, we have been publishing a radical magazine called Natun Padatik. And so many ups and downs in the office. And in the face of quite heavy odds. But we have survived, and at present we have a fairly wide popular support, first of all. And secondly, it has some influence today on public opinion, some, not much. And our readers are baffled, perplexed by many questions today. And we don't think that we have the right answers. That's why it is important for us to have a discussion. And it is a great opportunity for us to hear from Arundhati Roy from the horse's mouth itself.
That's not very polite.
Well, I think I haven't called it mayor.
That would have been better.
Mayor's is mayor's nest, you know. And then
what about a nightmare?
It could be a nightmare for us, I don't know. And well, these questions which have occurred to our leaders, and to which we don't think we have the right answers, we shall address to you, and your views will be recorded, and they should be offered to our leaders.
Okay. Sounds right.
No, I'm quite sure.
I don't think I have the right answer.
No,
I don't know. We'll have a conversation.
By this time already, this our Padatik, we have already translated in local language your articles.
Okay.
Yeah, several articles.
Several articles of you.
Okay.
And
Of course, without informing you.
Violating the copyrighted law. Yeah.
and
That is part of my politics.
Exactly. We understand that. Yeah.
so we have actually gathered together, and framed some questions we would like to have. These are for ourselves as well as for our readers. The first question is, do you believe that the writer as writer and writer as citizen are two different roles? Do you think that writing should be political? If I may say so, George Orwell, for example, said, his position was that, and that of many others, that writing itself is something quite different from politics. And therefore, the writer as writer doesn't have a political role as such. So how will you respond to that?
I think that from that time, many kinds of politics, including the feminist movement, which said the personal is political, has made it much harder to separate what is non-political from what is political. So as far as I'm concerned, even a fairy story is political. I don't know how you can make that separation anymore, because what you your silences are as political as your statements, So for me, it's not something that I spend all my time thinking about. What I do, I mean, in my own life as a writer, what does concern me is the differences of speed and urgency. Like, of course, I have written a book of fiction. Subsequently, I've spent a lot of time writing non-fiction, and much of the time that non-fiction appears at a time when the tide is turning against the opinion that I offer. So it's always written. The timing of when it appears has been very crucial, not just what it's saying, but when it's being said. And to write fiction, you need more time. Perhaps it's more subversive in some ways, but you need more time, and sometimes I have felt that I didn't have that time, so I must write this now, and therefore I write it in a particular way. But it isn't because I think one form is literary and the other is not, or one is political and the other is not. I mean, I don't think that anybody could say that what is known as my political writing is more political than The God of Small Things.
Right. Fine. But it's a different way of understanding politics or addressing.
Well, it's not a different way of understanding it. It's a different vehicle of communicating it. Because
also the communication, it assumes a certain kind of response. The response you can have to a pamphlet is different from the response to you have to an office.
Sometimes and sometimes not. I mean, in terms of, for example, in Kerala, The God of Small Things had, very silent it had a very, and oddly enough, the things I write about now and the issues of caste and the extreme left and all of that are very similar to what I write about.
I actually didn't mean that. I meant that the imagination, for example, is much more at work, both in writing and in reading works of fiction, than in, let's say, there are no hard and fast lines. Differentiate. The second question is, what according to you is the state of media in present day India? Are they of any help in meeting the aspirations of people and changing consciousness in the positive direction? There's a lot of things, TV, this, that, hundreds of papers, magazines,
so journals.
We are absolutely swamped by it. What is the role? How do you put it?
Well, first of all, there are so many different kinds of media. I mean, there's the internet, and then there's the traditional media, print media, there's television. And then there are so many different kinds of people. So what do we mean by people, and what do we mean by positive, and all of that? I mean, I'm going to just make certain assumptions, but I think the way the media is affecting the way we think and the way we act is something which all of us haven't been able to fully understand, and partly it's terrifying, because we don't. I think India perhaps has more 24-hour news channels than any other country in the world. Every state has its own language channels, and there's live news and all of that. Now, increasingly, those channels are being, always the media was owned by industrialists and corporates, but now, in some overt way, they are being run. So, for example, you have Reliance owning 27 TV channels. You have the the CEO of the Times of India openly saying that we're not in the business of news, we're in the business of advertising, because 100% of the turnover comes from advertising. So what is the media doing? I think the media is becoming like a boardroom bulletin, which is addressing the concerns of a constituency which it considers its market, you know, and it's you know, the idea of reporting news is gone. Now it's not even manufacturing consent, it's manufacturing news, you know, and you know, whether how we deal with that is a big question. You know, of course you have the social media, which is getting a bigger and bigger play, what they call the social media, like Facebook and Twitter. You know, there's more and more information, there's more and more unreliable information, and yet there's more and more exposing or undermining the lies of the main corporate media as well. So it's becoming very dizzying, you know, it's very difficult for people to really understand what's going on. And I think I would say that now we are in a position or in a place where perhaps the media is more powerful than government, you know. You see that ministers and, you know, people just like begging to be heard, and excuse me, Mr. Goswami, do you mind if I say, no, you shut up, you say, you know, like he's got these people are really deciding what to highlight, what to orchestrate hysteria over, what to push off into the dark. You know, so even when they pick in a, let's say we assume that there's a war on, you know, whether it's, I'm not talking about war as in an armed struggle or anything, but generally a war of a certain section of the population grabbing from another section of the population. The media is very much part of the war, and in a war, your choice of symbols is also part of the war. So, which rape are you going to highlight? Which political issue are you going to pick on and drum up this use? You see people performing, you know, I'll go into this demonstration and run home in the evening to watch myself on TV. And, you know, it's difficult to keep up with the politics and all that.
What do you think of the vernacular media? I mean, do you have any idea? I mean, they can't be so aligned with big business. They have their own interests.
The Dainik Bhaskar, for instance, Dainik Bhaskar, it has a readership of 17.5 million. It owns 60 companies, including mining companies, power companies. You know, so they are aligned with big business, big time.
No, but you know, in the other languages,
The local
languages,
Indian English.
What about Kerala? The same thing there?
Kerala, you have one newspaper which sort of dominates the whole thing, but it's not. I mean, it's not a corp. It's still it's like the Hindu, you know, still family owned and all that. But I think, you know, I think we can't take a simple position on media, because there's also no point in just going on complaining about it. You know, you also have to live with it as a reality and think about how to kind of subvert it sometimes.
No, can't we have an alternative media? I mean,
there is. I mean, the internet is increasingly becoming an alternate. But then, you see, when you say can't we have, they, in inverted commas, also have, you know, so the VHP or the artists, meaning they are even better at it than you know, others in drumming up, in creating rumors, and you know, all of that.
They are verbal media.
Yeah, and
Purely verbal nature.
and so far, I mean, in many cases, the internet reaches a very small section of the population.
That's it.
But we do have small, like your magazine, and we do have a whole network of little subversions going on, which is an excellent thing.
Are you aware of www.sanhati.com?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Are the movement groups also bringing out? You know about a lot of resistance movement or movement groups in the country. What is the role of the media that they are bringing up? Or are they having kind of media to publish their views and all?
Well, some are trying. Like, we saw there's this Samadrishti, which tries to bring out a video magazine, of which it sort of circulates among places. It's difficult, because people who are involved in resistance are so pushed to the wall in every way. It's not easy for them. Of course, the Maoist Party, for example, has their own, they have their own magazines and their own. Yeah, they also have in Goli and, they try. So.
Is it sort of underground or is
Yeah.
it underground?
So next is about the parliamentary politics in the country. The question is, what is your view of parliamentary politics in India today, including the role of the parliamentary left? How do you look at that?
Well, I've written quite a lot about it. See, I think that it's important to look at what has happened to democracy, not just in India but everywhere. I always think about the fact that until the 70s, you had what were then the imperialist powers, mostly led by the US and England. They were very busy toppling democratic governments in Latin America and in the Middle East and all over, in India. Now you see the opposite, that they are waging wars and supposedly to install democracy. Why should that be? Because they've learned how to manage democracy. They've learned how to hollow out those institutions and make them serve the market, make them serve the interests of big business. And so they want to install democracy. And in India, if you look at parliamentary politics, somebody was asking me, a girl had come from Lebanon and she said, will you ever have an Arab Spring in India? So I said, of course not, because we have elections, Why would we have an Arab Spring? All the pent up anger will be in an election. So you know that parliamentary democracy has been hollowed out and its shell has been put in place. And the parliamentary left is also very much part of that, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if the left had remained left, would it not have tried to stop the process of the opening of the markets, the dismantling of the labor law, the dismantling of trade unions? It just became this sort of meaningless rhetoric and an ability to viciously fight with each faction, fight with each other with some highly developed insults, But other than that, the parliamentary left has, I think, lost the right to call itself left.
The other question is about the development the government is talking about. The government has now been asserting that there was a point when the economy was undergoing stagnation. Now it has overcome the stagnation and it is undergoing a process of development. How do you look at it?
Well, there isn't, there isn't one way of looking at it because, when you use words like India or China or America, now what does that mean? Because certainly certain sections of the Indian population have suddenly been released into a kind of highly speedy growth at the cost of a vast underclass, So it's like what happens is that there was always a great disparity in India. It's not that there wasn't, but there was a big watery layer and there was a thin layer of cream, and they sort of scrambled it and thickened the layer of cream, and the rest of the water is just people who are not the consuming class, so they can be just dispersed, So it's really very terrifying because you come to a state where the official imagination does not know what to do with vast populations of poor people. So you look at, even in the way they speak, on the one hand they say that the vision is that they want these huge megalopolises where they want 70% of the population to be urbanized, which means moving about 500 or 600 million people, forcibly or unforcibly. The same people who say that, the Indian Prime Minister or Chidambaram, without even taking a breath in between, will say that these new immigrants into the cities are criminals. Yeah. So you don't want them in the villages, you don't want them in the cities, you don't have place for them in jail, there are too many of them to kill. So, there's no imagination in which you can accommodate them at all. There isn't even the language, forget the geographical space or the economic space.
Now, what do you think of their claim to create an inclusive development? Are they being sincere? Is it a false consciousness? Or is it sheer deception?
Oh, that could be, in parallel. They are also talking about a lot of populist policies now, for example, Rega, NRHM. All this they are talking about in the name of inclusive development. How do you look at the politics of this whole policy regime now?
Okay, Narega, for example, it's you take away everything from people. You take their land, you take their livelihood, you take everything, and then you say, okay, come and break stones, and I'll give you, 8,000 rupees a year, which is about as much as they spend on a dinner with wine and dessert. And then nobody can even criticize it because it means a lot to the poor who are getting at least that. And of course they're not even getting that because the Thekedars are taking everything and all that. And you're creating a sort of nanny state, and you're taking away people's initiative of doing any real work because, you can get, because of corruption, you can obviously get your Narega and other people's Narega as well without, or it's just creating a situation which you can't even criticize, because if you criticize your anti-work, the right is also criticizing it, So it's obviously like a throwing crumbs at while you're stealing the meal and throwing the crumbs back. And so the idea that it's a inclusive growth, it is sheer deception, because they know very well what's going on. They know very well. But also when you created a situation where you create a little bubble which contains a very noisy middle class, a very noisy media, a very noisy Bollywood, everything is so noisy. It's easy to is the universe, and there isn't anything outside it. And that you are including people, and they've even forgotten how to. I mean, when would you think the last time was that the Prime Minister of India even went to a village? I mean, does he know how to go to a village? I don't know anymore. Or even the editor of a big paper or a big news channel. You lost the language in which to speak to a huge population.